Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. My name's Deborah Hatswell, and you're listening to the case files of BBR Investigations, the home of cryptids, the paranormal, and the unexplained. As you know, I've been working on a case that centres around a family living in a very active haunted home in Sutton Bridge in Lincolnshire. What I'm sharing with you today is my culmination of my finds and my journal of notes on the Pets Lane case from the 12th of March to the 18th of April. I did so much work on the case and I wanted to share with you how the process works for me. And at the beginning of this podcast, you'll hear my thoughts and my gut feelings before I did any background research on the case. And by the end, which was 2 hours ago, I shared all my findings with Chrissa. We're recording all of our thoughts and feelings and any intuitive thoughts in a message thread. And it's that message thread I'm sharing with you now. Plus all of the background research that I've done into the case. So this week we're catching up with Chrissy and Simon, a lovely couple who live at 33 Pets Lane, Sutton Bridge, Lincolnshire, with their 3 boys. In last week's show, I shared how myself and Chrissy came into contact and what had been happening at the home since she first bought it about 25 years ago. I left off where I'd explained to Chrissa that I felt, with all of the different kinds of activity happening, there was more than one thing going on. There wasn't just a dark presence at the property. This was picked up on by another paranormal team who did an investigation at the home and spoke with a local historian about 2 years ago. Now, although I have no concerns with that presence and I don't feel it needs dealing with, we both agreed the boys in the home were our number one priority. The dark one is old and not the first man of the Pets family to call that stretch of shore home. He's grumpy, he isn't fond of people, and he does not like any males that come close to Chrissy. And for all he presents to outsiders as dark and foreboding, he does have a soft spot for Chrissy. She feels he's the reason that so many males are affected negatively at the property. Now, there are many beings and entities and dark forces that will attach to a plot of land, or a home, and will cause mayhem, confusion and fear to the living. And in the worst cases, enslavement to any shade that's out there alone. Now, we are not dealing with that situation here. Many times when people pass over from an accident or sudden death, it happens so quickly, they don't realise they're now in spirit and could have moved on given the choice. I've interacted with several energies that needed to be told that they were free to leave and go back to source. There is an all-encompassing love within that source that connects us to our ancestors and loved ones. We can help in this by connecting to source ourselves and asking their loved ones and ancestors to show them the way home. I believe this is the reason for many intelligent hauntings. What we see as spirits looking for attention can be a person who lived there, has passed on, just going about their everyday lives, not knowing why things have changed around them. I would imagine that's incredibly frustrating. For example, an ex-owner of the property who makes a new family's lives a misery could simply be unaware that it is still not their land, their home or their farm. They see the humans in it as trespassers, and that can increase the negative activity. A simple talk with them and a request to source are often all that's needed to move them on. Some want to stay in this realm, and others go between the two. And many of these things are happening at Pets Lane, and we need to sort through those layers as we try and help with this darker activity. Thankfully, I have a good handle on the case, and I've not done my research yet. And I'm hoping when I do, I can fill in some of the blanks for Chrissy and Simon. I have no fears or concerns in this case, and Chrissy and Simon are far more powerful together than any dark force could ever dream to be. I believe they were brought together and to this property to help those lost souls. I honestly believe Chrissy and Simon have been brought together for that very reason. And if they can free the lost souls trapped there, the path will open up before them, as it already has. Chrissy agrees with me that it's not a simple matter of darkness at the home. There's also lots of positive energy around, And I do feel a tug of war between good and evil sometimes. Chrissy feels it too. And we also have one of the original family members who set up home on the land who would prefer it if it was still their home, as it was when they lived there. He certainly does not enjoy strangers visiting or being on the land. I think over the years he's become tolerant of Chrissy and the boys, like a grumpy old grandfather. And I think he admires the way she sticks it out, good or bad, no matter how much effort it will take to restore the home as it was originally and fix all of the problems that come with a lonely headland farmhouse set next to storm and sea. Samuel is a name I'm being given very strongly, and I keep seeing snapshots of my own Uncle Sam. And this Samuel knows that Chrissy loves that land in the same way that he did. I wouldn't want to mess with Chrissy or her boys, as I have a feeling he'd make himself known. I'll explain more about this as we catch up on events at home. Now, when I was researching lost souls in the river out at sea or on the ships named for the River Nene, which runs at the side of the house and is the estuary, I came across so many people who'd lost their lives. But the case in 1830, when 9 people lost their lives on a short day trip out to fish and pick samphire close to the lighthouse, is very important. That boat returned to shore later that day. Good weather, but a squall came in quickly, tipped the boat, leaving only one survivor, which was a lady from Sheffield. Many on board were visitors from Sheffield, but the river pilot, Edward Burton, aged 41, and his son, Bernard Burton, aged 12, also died, and the bodies of the men, women and children from the boat were brought up onto the shore, just where Chrissy and Simon and the boys live. Simon and Chrissy are aware, as Chrissy is feeling the need to help Bernard, and the other children who lost their lives on the boat go home to where they should be, surrounded by love. As I write this, I've not traced any previous owners of the home, and I'd love to know if they've experienced any activity at the house at all, over the years that they lived there. I'm theorising. I suppose my gut tells me the lost souls numbering into double figures over the centuries have sought solace at the home. This house is a literal lighthouse for spirit. I feel that this may be the reason for the activity the children were experiencing around the home. My instinct also tells me that Bernard and the other children recognised their energy and probably felt solace being there with them. The boys are young, the oldest being not much older than Bernard, and it's not surprising they're experiencing this activity. Don't forget the CCTV capture of the child's hand reaching around the doorway. Chrissy said, "Deb, I think the negative thing on the property is in that garage, but I do feel better talking with you about it. I feel more settled now. And when you explained about the boat wreck and the young boy, it made more sense to me. It's been 23 years of thinking I'm going bonkers living here. Weirdly, Simon said last week, I think there are lost souls here, and I have to free them somehow. I never knew there were that many deaths on the river and out in the bay until you explained all of them. Simon once said my energy is a bit like a light bulb in the dark. It made me laugh, to be honest, but I do find myself randomly talking to strangers. I end up giving them readings. This actually happened on mine and Simon's first date with the lady who was serving us. Wow, my mind's blown. I'm not mad. Right now, I'm going to try and figure out how to help these souls. I asked Chrissy if I'd gotten her story correct and helped her with the way she was feeling and any confusion that she had. And she said, "Oh, you most certainly done me proud. I can't thank you enough. The only thing I did know about the river was that the old port collapsed back in the 1800s. I've never thought about wrecks or drownings, which I know sounds stupid. There's certainly a lot of wood in my roof that's all authentic to the age of the house. And Simon hates going up to that loft. He said a few times it feels horrible to be up there. It's dark and it's horrid and he feels like someone's watching him. But when you explained about some houses being made from the old wrecks, that kind of made sense. So I'll take your advice and I'll sit and relax into it and try and sketch. or just watch the river or the sea and see if anything comes through. I used to sit and give myself time to reflect before I had the children. I should go back to that. The boys are all good, although I do have a careful eye on the youngest, as he's the most sensitive to the activity. Chrissy updated me on the 3rd of April, and she said, "It's really late, so I guess we both stay up late, Deb. I didn't think you'd be up, but our house is humming tonight. Almost like the feel of a boat engine. But no, there are no boats around. I'm almost tempted to go outside. I'll do my best at putting them all to rest, Deb. I'm sure I'll get some guidance from my family who have passed on, but I'll ask you sometimes if you don't mind. I'm a bit of an artist, so I did think when the boys are back at school, I'd do what I used to do as a child. I'd get myself into a zone and just draw. It's a weird thing. Me and my youngest son share it. I know now I need to do it again. I need to help them find peace, and that could be the way. I just wanted to tell you something weird that happened last night. It was a weird synchronicity, and I always take note when that happens. I was sitting with Simon, and we were talking, and I said to him, for my birthday, I want an old CB radio. I wanted one when I was a girl, but I haven't thought about it in years. So Simon showed me a YouTube channel, and I started watching the episodes and watching the energy that surrounds us on an interview you did. And the man interviewing you said, ask you how you got started, and you mentioned a CB radio. I'd like to ask you one question. Do you think people's energies can align sometimes? Like we are literally on the same wavelength? Because this has happened to me before with a few of my witchy friends. Tomorrow, I'm going to go to the graveyard and find the father and the son and leave the little offering for them. I've listened to the video you made 3 times now, and it's blown me away. Things are starting to fall into place. I agree with Chrissy on all points. As I sat making my notes, I feel she's already connected to the boat pilot Edward Burton and his son Bernard. They're mixed into this somehow. She feels Edward carries some guilt and sadness about his son losing his life, along with a lot of remorse, which is understandable. We carry those feelings even when we pass on. I also know that when you combine energy with someone, or things start to make sense finally, activity can amp up, and the messages and hints coming clearer. It happens for me too. I often have people tell me after an interview or a visit that activity has increased around them. And this is certainly the case for me and Chrissy at the moment. But I recognise it, it happens often. It's like a conversation without words. When you bring 2 people together with the right energy, amazing things can happen. So the next day, there had been more activity, and Chrissy let me know. She sent across the CTV, and she said, this was the 4th of April. Tonight, I heard a noise outside. We thought it was a car turning into my drive. Nope, there was no car when we looked. The camera connection was lost for a bit. Simon went out there. I hit record, but it wouldn't work correctly. But it caught that awful sound in the garage again. We don't know what the original noise was that made us aware to begin with. She said, my youngest son came back tonight after a week at his dad's, and the orb started straight away when he got home. I believe he's especially gifted like I am. Maybe now acknowledging I'm realising what's happening around us more. You made me more comfortable with that, Deb. My son has autism, ADHD, and there was a time he drew some very dark things on his ceiling in his room until I put my foot down on that. I just find it strange how the activity I know will amp up here because he's come back. Now, there is a short 10-second clip of this recording, and I've added it to the end as it does have audio on it, because you will see several orbs moving around in the corridor, and you hear the children playing and myself talking in the background. And for anybody who's listening on the podcast, there is a link to that video below, and all of the CCTV and audio captures to date. Another strange thing, Deb, is I'm constantly hearing that hymn, the one that goes, for all those that perished in the sea. I didn't tell you about that. And even though I was brought up in the Church of England, I'm a witch. It's so lovely to say that out loud without fear or ridicule, finally. I've been a witch since I was 11. My Nanny Prod, who also heard spirit, was in the Salvation Army. She was a veteran. Each to their own. We have all got to believe in something. And I'm starting to believe in myself now. And this is true. When we trust and believe in ourselves and the things that are happening around us, we trust our judgment and gut feelings, it brings with it a new confidence, a new way of looking at the world. And it doesn't matter what that is that works for you. I class myself as a hedge witch. I use the elements to weave my intent. But it's different for each and every one of us. Just being able to stand up and say it was incredibly freeing for me. I understand what Chrissy means. The connotation added to the word witch since the Roman invasion has been dark and horrid. It didn't used to be like that. We were seen as wise women. You started to become a witch in your early youth. Your magic, that's your sense of self. There's no trickery, no jiggery pokery. It's your energy, recognising it and recognising what you can do with it. There are many kind of witches. We all choose our own path. I've been using the elements since I can remember to set intent, before I even knew what I was doing. If something scared me, I'd think about it in my head and I'd bind it up with loads of like weeds and nettles and awful stuck blackberry things, and then I'd burn it, and then I'd get the wind to blow it away, and then I'd clean it with the water. And I came to that intuitively. I never called myself a witch when I was little. Honestly, I was convinced I was going to be an alchemist. I don't even know where that come from. Beat that. I didn't even know what it was until I was much older. I heard my mum say the word when I mixed up several potions in the bath one day and nearly stripped my skin off. Regular thing for me, that. Maybe that's why I have an affinity with John Dee and why it's so important to me growing up. Not the turning metal into gold stuff. It was the scrying and trying to find a portal into the other realm. Like Jack Parsons, the rocket scientist, in his attempts to do this. I was fascinated with that as a kid. I've always been drawn to the idea that if I found the right combination of things, I could open up a slit in the ether. Strange, I know. No 6-year-old girl should be thinking about that, should she? I used to call it the window. So, like, how do we open the window? Why can't other people see through that window? Just as a child, that's all you know, isn't it? It's all I knew. Chrissy said something that grabbed me and made me look at my early life. I lived in Salford, where the Manchester Ship Canal is. It's an inland port. I never put this together with my granddad being a merchant seaman until Chrissy mentioned the port and said that she was amazed and felt silly that she hadn't thought of the connection to the port close to her home and the spirits in the house. My granddad had a small holding close to the docks, part scrapyard and part mini farm and stables. We would always be around the docks. They were close to my home, and as the years went on, not the best part of town. They were heavily bombed during the war. My nan said one day she was running to the air raid shelter with Gerald in a pram, and the German pilot flew so low that she looked into his eyes. You take the surroundings you grow up in for granted. It never entered my head that I lived in a port town until Chrissy said she had not thought of the shipwrecks having something to do with the happenings at the house. We just forget what we see every day. We take our surroundings for granted. And it wasn't 24 hours before I got my next message from Chrissy, and this was on the 5th of April. And she said, Deb, we probably have about 50 odd videos in total now, and the cameras have not been in here this long. The house has a crazy energy. I did something last night after I watched a programme where Deborah was being interviewed, and she said that it's the fear of something that we need to get rid of, as the fear clouds your instincts. So I went outside to the garage. That terrifies me. And I spoke to it. And I said to all the souls that are there, I'm shining a light for you. I will help you. It was so windy and the rain was pounding. So I heard shouting and screams, and my head felt like it was going to explode. So I came inside and I started drawing, just letting my hand go as it pleased. Half the time I wasn't even looking at the page. My eyes and head were banging, and my hand stopped. I put the pen down, and then I ran to the bathroom. I was physically sick. Now I know what I did wrong. I let them rush in. I said all souls instead of saying form an orderly queue, so I'd let them in one at a time. That's so silly of me. I don't think what Chrissy did was silly. I did the exact same thing. When I realised I could help them, I said, right, okay, I give in. I stopped running. I'm ready. And I was hit with 1,000 voices all at once. I was ill for about 4 days the first time. I had to learn to phrase things very carefully, and I hit a few more bumps along the way. But each bump gave me an insight into where I was going wrong. It's how us humans learn. Chrissy is doing intuitively what she needs to do. The path will unfold before her, and she will get better and better at managing it and keeping a balance. Chrissy went on to explain. Anyway, I asked them to back off while still sitting on the bathroom floor, and I felt it clear. I was a bit shaky, so I went straight to bed. I went out there at, 12 at night, and by the time I got to bed, it was 2 a.m. But it didn't feel like 2 hours had gone past. It just felt like a few minutes. Anyway, I put my head on the pillow, my fan on, and then bang, the whole house electric went. So I got up, went to the fuse board, and it just kept tripping. So I shut all the switches off and began turning them on one by one. And it was the outdoor power for my lights. Anyway, it's going to take me a bit, but I think I can help them move on one by one. Here's a drawing I did. Excuse that it's not that good. I wasn't trying to be an artist of the year, but it was that weird smile and his eyes were too close together. I think it's really, really good. It's automatic drawing. I can automatic write. I have no control of it. It comes at will, at whim, just floods in. I've had to get Mark to sit on the toilet before today and write down the words because I was in the bath as they came and flooded, you know. When I first looked at the drawing Chrissy sent me, I'll admit it scared me. So I get how the boy feels seeing it around the home. It scared me so much I closed my phone on it. My daughter Jodie visited the next day, and I felt the urge to ask her to look, which I rarely do with Jo. She's still coming to terms with her own abilities and how to manage them. Like me, Jodie sees the dark ones around her, and that's not an easy path to walk. She can't shake them, and at times she feels compelled to shut off. They can change her personality. So I was hesitant about showing her the sketch. But when she looked at it, she said, "You're not looking at him right, Mum. Look at him as a man, or as a nan would." And I did. And I suddenly saw a boy, made of energy, smiling, because he'd finally been seen. His energy is recognised. His life and soul are a diamond in Chrissy's hands. She felt him, and she went looking for his grave and any information she could find on him. And she said, "It's the 7th of April, and I've been looking at newspaper articles. I found one about the boating accident that you made me aware of. There were 3 children lost at sea that day, one of the same name as my youngest son. And anyway, if you'd like me to send them you, let me know. I've been to the graveyard, and I found 2 of my lost souls here already. So I left my little offering of a teddy bear and I spoke to them. It was a good day." Chrissy sent me some images via WhatsApp that I think tie into our theory of the house, or the land probably still has the remnants of old wrecks within it. On the 14th of April, Chrissy got in touch again and she sent me some images. And she said, "I meant to send you these ages ago. This is the brick room I found out at the back of the property when I was digging some foundations for my new extension." So it was underground. It did have the old extension above it at one point, which was a wooden, very old structure. This was the door I was talking about, with the banging sound I would hear, that we struggled to get to. Anyway, I found it in 2016, and it's now filled in, but it had a concave roof and what looked like a fireplace with perished old wooden slats across the ceiling. I've shown it to Simon, and he thinks it's an old smokehouse. Samuel Pepys was a gamekeeper and a fisherman, so it could make sense, especially with all of the old wood wrecks around. Maybe the first wooden structure came from those wrecks. 2 days later, I heard from Chrissy again on the 16th, and she said, "The cameras are being triggered constantly at the moment with too many anomalies for her to keep on top of. So I'm hoping that I can reach out to some people who do some analysis of all the footage and audio, and I've reached out to several of my contacts. I want to keep the background research separate from that, as if feeling this will all lead to something personal to Chrissy and the boys. I strongly know this is about family. Hers or Samuel's, I don't know yet, but that's where the answer lies. As I mentioned last week, I added Chrissy to the support group I have for females who've experienced strange things their entire lives. Each person in there has a different experience, and some have walked the learning path and are good for advice, or suggestions, and others are starting out that journey. Chrissy shared some of the activity in the home she'd experienced in the group, and she said she was happy for me to share it with you. But firstly, I'd like to touch on the gut feelings Chrissy had. She had a strong urge to find the grave of Edward and Bernard, and she followed that urge and left a small teddy for Bernard at the site. She's opening up, sharing her weirdness and getting comfortable with it. I wear mine like a crown. Chrissy's been drawing her whole life, and I want to encourage that. I think automatic sketching may bring forward other spirits. I'm also going to take some time out this week and do some automatic writing on the case. Something I haven't allowed myself to do for a very long time. Why? Because people ridicule me about it. And I'm still that 15-year-old girl trying to prove that she's not lying. I need to do as I preach. I tell people never to question the gut while suppressing my own. Is that why I message thread? So I can prove exactly when and how things happened? I don't know. It's just my process. It's how it works for me. Like Chris said, when I realised that I was never going to be able to leave my abilities behind, and there was no running away from them or disguising them in any way, I finally accepted that this was me. Some would understand and others would not. Some see me as a helper and a friend, and others of the darker kind see me as an enemy or a foe. I'm happy to wear that crown. But to be believed is different from all of that. As children, when we see things that adults can't, we end up with the label bad. For me, it was naughty, willful, defiant, when in reality, it was confusion and fear. If I can change that narrative going forward, I need to do when I preach and explore all areas of my abilities. Like Chris said, I want to see what I can do with what I have available to help other people. Now, I'd like to talk about the dark presence on the land. I think it's important to understand his tie to the area and why he's so negative. I've had the feeling for some time that it may be someone who lived on that land where the house was built. Someone who liked to be out there, solitary, without all the hustle and bustle of people. But I also didn't want to suggest this to Chrissy, as we're gelling so well. And I knew early on that she'd mentioned his name. She mentioned a Samuel, and Samuel was a name that kept coming in for me. I'll share what Chrissy told me, and then I'll share what I've been able to find out about him and why he feels so strongly that he wants to hold modern life at bay. The house was built in 1830, along with a new bridge. The name of the road where the house sits is named after Samuel Pets. I found his birthday, 1830, which is the same year the house was built. He was still living there in 1881, as the census lists him as a shepherd. His roots in the area go back generations, and his family have lived there since the very first records were taken. He would have lived out on the headland, seeing to his flock. We also know he was responsible for the pump house on the property, where a lot of that audio activity takes place. He would have used the smokehouse to cure the fleece and, of course, smoke the meat of any fish that he caught. And the lambs, I suppose. He was conceived there, born when the small bay began to become a place for holidays for Victorian families. His quiet headland in the summer would have had ladies and gentlemen from all across England using the bay, the beach and the shore. By the time he was in his 40s, it was a bustling port. 200 years later, and the port is even bigger. I would imagine Samuel isn't happy about all of this, and you can blame him. I remember taking for granted the fields and the woods on the edge of my hometown as a small girl. My grandparents told me tales of walking their flocks to market and how rural it was for them. It was a town for me. Long before the building of the inland docks made my area also into a bustling port. And with that comes noise and confusion and good memories too. I wrote on the 17th of April. There is one further serendipity I'd like to close on, and I think that is a connection I found between Samuel Petts and Bernard Burton's mother Sarah. I think Samuel's related to the Burton family. He was born the year Bernard, aged 12, lost his life when the boat piloted by his father capsized. I will, of course, do more digging into this and see where it leads me. We know there was a wooden house at the spot before the current farmhouse was built, and I'm betting that's the Petts family's earlier home. Samuel Petts' father was named George Petts, and he married Sarah Burton. George was also a river pilot and a pumpman. He lived in the original wooden farm home on the property and built the current home in his 20s. The Petts and Burton families have been involved with the home since the day it was built. I wonder how many births and wakes, weddings, birthdays and Christmas times and family gatherings have happened in the home over the last 2 centuries. It looks like they still gather there often. I also wonder if the home was built in stages. The hallway area is very active. This is where we could see most of the visual anomalies. And as I say, there's a video link provided in the description below to see those. Could this have been the centre of the farmhouse where a lot of activity would have happened? My knowing tells me it would have been a small home at first with a central fireplace. Then you'd have a smokehouse, dairy and other buildings that get added on over the years. The last member of the Petts family to own the home passed away in the 1960s, and I'm wondering if this was why the house was put up for sale, as Mrs. Moore, the previous tenant, bought the home around that time and then sold it to Chrissy's parents. They in turn sold it on after only staying a very short time due to Chrissy not settling as a child, and without knowing, Chrissy bought the home 23 years later. It looks like time is weaving its magic in this case. I think my next step will be to look at the deeds of the home or the land if possible for more clues. And I'm wondering if somewhere down in the threads of time, Chrissy's bloodline connects to all of this. So to summarise, what we have here is a beautiful part of the Lincolnshire coast that was lived and worked by the Petts family. They own the original building on the land, and I would imagine that George and Sarah loved every brick and piece of wood that went into that home. It was their symbol, I would imagine, of how far they'd come. You know, they were farmers and boat pilots. They connected to the land in a way that other people who don't live there wouldn't understand. Samuel was born on that land. He was conceived on that land. He worked it. He enjoyed it. He had bad times and good times, ill health and, sickness, all of the tribulations that you go through in life. That land is connected to him in the same way that he's connected to it. So it doesn't seem strange to me that he's really unhappy about certain people who are on the land or around his home. He's still living there in his eyes, and they're trespassers. He was also responsible, as was his father, for the pump house. And I feel that he is still doing that duty. So when they're hearing audio and activity, I think he's moving around, and that's what's triggering the CCTV. I think he's just at his home. Samuel's children had the home until it was sold to Mrs. Moore, and she was the first person to buy it that wasn't a member of the Petts family, and she had a terrible look at the house. She lost her own son on the lane when he died. She was reluctant to sell it to Chrissy because her experiences had been so negative, but Chrissy felt compelled to buy it, even though she didn't know she'd ever lived there as a child. It was only on telling her parents where her and her first husband had bought a home that her mum informed her that they'd lived in the house. Chrissy was born there, and the reason they sold it was she never settled as a child. I think she was picking up on the dark energy of Samuel back then and all of the other spirits. And I think he recognised her when she came back. The house at that point was in terrible disrepair, and she's done everything that she can do to kind of fix it up, you know. I'm not sure who sold it to Mrs. Moore, but it was Mrs. Moore who Chrissy bought it from. Yeah. And that home was dark from the first year that she entered. Constant activity. Seeing the dark shape near the garage, the pump house on the land. And that first year, even though she hadn't uncovered the smokehouse until 2016, she heard banging on that door. The activity was so great that doors would unscrew, as would screws and other things in the home. Was that Samuel going round, returning things to the way he wanted them? There's so much activity gone on there. They've heard things. The children have seen things. Chris's younger son went through a stage where he was drawing really dark things on his ceiling, and she managed to nip that in the bud. And I think because she's such a positive person, that's why it's kept most of the energy at bay. But he doesn't like other males. The first husband moved in, and moving into that house changed him as a person, and that's why they divorced. And when he left the home, he went back to how he was. Same thing with the second husband. Simon's a lot stronger than that. And for all it doesn't like him, he knows that that's the best person for Chrissy. And that's why he's backed off. I think when the paranormal team came in earlier before me, they weren't privy to any of this information. They did do an investigation. And one of the investigators was actually locked in Chrissy's bedroom, and he was a male. And I think that was once again Samuel stating his dominance, his presence. They spoke to a local researcher, but she just told him about the port collapse. So all of the information that we've gathered since and the CCTV footage, they weren't privy to that. I mean, I'm incredibly lucky that I've been able to put all of that together. But as I say, it started the moment Chrissy entered the home. But in reality, it started when she was born there. Those spirits recognise her. She's been there before. She's done everything she can to bring the home back. It's taken 23 years and she's still doing it, And then we have to look at all of the deaths in the River Nene and out on the bay. Those souls would have to go somewhere. And that home is a literal lighthouse out there near the lighthouse, if you get what I mean, for souls, for those that are lost. I had a gentleman come through to me whose name was Homer, not Omer. And he was Mediterranean. He was showing me white painted homes and boats in a very blue, beautiful sea. And Chrissy instantly tuned in and said, I think that's Malta, Deb, and it does tie into me. So I was grateful for that. And then we have the boat that capsized. There was Bernard and his father, Edward. And then there were 9 other people on the boat, some of them children. And they'd come down from the day from Sheffield. And they'd hired the boat to take them out into the bay while they did some fishing. And then they would do what the locals did and pick samphire on the side of the bay. And they would have lunch with it as they came back in. And it was a lovely day. But as they were coming back in, an unexpected squall happened and that boat was tipped. And unfortunately, as I say, 9 people lost their lives. One of them being Bernard, who was 12 years old. And there is a child of a similar age to that, although older now, in the home. One of the other boys that died in the capsize has the same name as Chris's youngest child. And I don't think that that's a coincidence because I honestly don't believe in them. There are so many serendipities in this case. To me, it looks like the hands of time reached out, found the right person to live in that home. Chrissy can pass those people over, the ones that want to go. She started with her automatic sketching, and I think that'll pan out more for her as we go forward. She's thinking about who she can cross over first and how to do it in a balanced and safe way for her. Her main priority is the children, and I agree with that. So any activity, there's no point me sending her to teaming. That's just going to amp everything up. He's not going to be happy about it. And he's happy as he is now. And Chrissy's happy with him. So I just advised that they had a chat. I said to her, just state your boundaries with him and let him know what's acceptable. And she said, I've already done that. They've reached a status quo. And I think that works out for everybody. So why would I run in and put the satanic panic on it? That's not going to help anyone, is it? But I hope it shows you how the investigations happen. It doesn't all happen in a 24-hour period, you know. So I've gone from not knowing anything about the case and continuously getting the name Samuel, but I don't want to ask her about it. I don't want to prompt her mind or power of suggestion or any of that. And then she mentions him to me in a message. She said the man that the road was named after was called Samuel Pets. And I thought, there we go. I'm right. I'm on the right. So you keep digging then. You keep digging and you go into Ancestry and you see what you can find. So when I was able to put the Burton family, who was Edward Burton, the pilot, and Bernard Burton, who was 12, and the Pets family together in a marriage, that made perfect sense to me and Chrissy, and I couldn't wait to get it over to her. And I did that 2 hours ago. So I'm still sat here in that energy where I'm thinking, I've done it, I've solved it. I've gone from not knowing anything to putting two families together that would have spent so much time together in those homes, even if they're just cousins or second cousins. It's a small village. There'll be lots of Burtons and lots of Pets, and that home connects all of them, as does the bay and out at sea. I told you last time the boat Bernard bought was found in King's Lynn, just a little south, and it washed up in the bay with 3 dead men on board that were never identified. And people believed that that boat was jinxed. So I believe that all of that happens. You've got Samuel on the land, still doing his smoking, still doing his jobs in the pump house. You've got Chrissy trying to get the home back to what it was, you know, when he had it, when it was his pride and joy. And I think he's grateful for that, even though he is a grumpy old bugger. He's like that grandfather that you have to go and visit, and you reluctantly know that he's not the nicest granddad in the world, but every now and again you get that nice smile off him and you think, oh, he does actually like me. That's the conversation I get when I think about the two of them. She's a guardian of the home, isn't she? She's a caretaker of the home, and he was, and he recognises that. So as long as those boys are happy and there's nothing negative going on around them, I'm happy to just let this case play out as it will now, naturally. You know, let's go back to a point where Chrissy and Simon are in charge. She understands what's happening now. She's a bit more confident in her abilities. And going forward, she'll learn more and more and more. It's like getting on a bike. Just getting on a bike, you just learn to do it. It's like learning to swim, you know. And of course, I'll keep you updated on everything. Over the next few weeks, I will be compiling all of the information that's being put together and that I've shared with you today. So all of the audio and the CCTV captures, the ancestry work that I did. And I've added a video link in the description so that you can watch the audio and CCTV captures. Now that video's silent, it has no music on it, so you can hear the audio captures clearly. Now remember, this is a family home out on the coast, so there'll be bugs, dust and other natural anomalies in those images. There are no CB radios or interference that could be affecting the audio captures, and the cameras run 24/7 and are triggered by movement. So often, Chrissy thinks that someone's pulled up into the driveway near the pump house and the garage, and this is usually the time when the audio is captured. Let me know if you see or hear anything. Please provide some timestamps with your comments, because I can't just sit and go through them, over and over again. I'd love to sit down and update you all and include all of the information sent in by everyone. Today, I gave the CCTV and the audio to my paranormal cousins to see what they can pick up on as well. And I'm sure that you will see things that I haven't caught. When looking at the date stamps on the captures, is there a pattern emerging? I seem to see one in the audio. The activity happens around certain times in the evening. And if you think you can help in this case with background research or local knowledge, I'd love to hear from you. If this was a taxi firm or the port, we should be hearing it 24/7, not in these random time spots. Is this the time that Samuel would be checking that pump house anyway? Maybe I could tie that to the tides. I don't know. That's just come into my head. Look at the tides, Deb. Look at the tides. And that's what I'll do. Now, if you have any local knowledge, or you'd be happy to do some online background research into this case, I'd love to hear from you, As I finish, I would like to ask again that people do not visit the property. No matter how well-meaning, or strongly you feel you should, this is their family home, and it's the home to young boys, and that should be in the forefront of your mind. Ask yourself how you would feel if strangers started to turn up at your door. Now, Simon and Chrissy have everything in hand, and to be completely frank with you, Samuel is not the nicest around visitors and strangers. I don't think it'd go very well for you. And one paranormal investigator, as a soldier who investigated the house a few years ago, was locked in Chrissy's bedroom. The spirit was so annoyed with him. Leave them be. Let them carry on with their lives in the way that they should. They've shared their story with you, and I feel that that's enough, and that's ample. And if time decides that we go in as an investigation team and you're supposed to be part in that, this is your first lesson on the path. Trust and believe. Don't push it. Don't rush it. Don't try and interfere. It will happen as and when it should. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you'll join me for future episodes. I release content like this every week, and I'm sure I'll cover a topic you enjoy, so don't miss out. Hit that follow or like button. Please check out my YouTube and Patreon memberships for early or exclusive content, and you can find the link to them and my social media and donation sites in one handy link tree below. BBR is not funded, so any donation, no matter how small, is highly appreciated. So I will bid you adieu, and I will be back at the same time, the same day, with more from the BBR Case Files.